he was lead author of a study on conventional deterrence. His PhD on the nuclear non-proliferation treaty was supervised at King's by Professor Lawrence Friedman. Dr. Harris read history and politics as vice chair in Oxford University. I request Dr. Harris to contribute.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Chima, for that kind introduction. Thank you to CISS for having us here, and thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you to IISS for bringing me here, and thank you to anyone else that hasn't yet. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk about the Iran nuclear deal, and I'd argue that this deal is an important part of stability and security in the Indian and Pacific Ocean regions and South Asia specifically. Firstly, for the simple reason that the deal helped avoid a serious conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. But secondly, because Pakistan and India both have important strategic relationships with Iran that require the nuclear issue to be under control and sanctions to be lifted in order for them to develop. For Pakistan, this includes the delayed energy pipeline with Iran, security issues in Balochistan, and Iran's interest in CPEC. For India, the deal is a major issue in terms of oil imports, of course, and the Chabahar port project. And Iran is also an important regional player more generally, including in Afghanistan. So any backsliding in the deal has the potential to lead to conflict and bring further instability to the region. Because there appears to be considerable potential for backsliding, I want to ask two questions today. Firstly, what is the current status of the Iran nuclear deal? And then secondly, to provide some context, what were the crucial conditions and compromises that originally allowed this deal to be struck, and is there any relevance to confidence building measures in the South Asian context? So, on the first question, what is the current status of the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA? Well, in 9 reports so far, the IAEA has said that Iran's nuclear program remains within the limits set out by the JCPOA, and the most recent report was in mid-November. But as you know, before the deal was finished in the summer of 2015, the US Congress passed legislation that it was intended to give Congress the power of review, as it was clear that the Iran deal was not going to be concluded in treaty form requiring ratification by the US Senate. And that legislation was titled the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, INARA. Under INARA, one of the mechanisms of congressional review was to require the president to certify every 90 days that Iran is complying with the deal. Now, President Donald Trump, as a candidate, took a variety of positions on the nuclear deal. He called it the worst deal ever, but he also said at a different time that it was a deal that the US would have to work with. What is clear, however, is that in personal and emotional terms, the president personally intensely dislikes the deal. And I think he dislikes it partly because it was a major achievement for President Obama. And this means that recertifying Iranian compliance with the deal every 90 days is something that he really does not enjoy. The broader context of this, however, is that the Trump administration in general wants to take a much tougher line on Iran. And even the administration's more moderate figures, and including those who are generally in favor of the Iran deal, such as James Mattis, are quite hard line on Iran itself. For Mattis, this includes the personal context of the 220 Marines that were killed in the Beirut bombing of 1983, Mattis being a Marine. So even the Iran deal's friends, I think, within the Trump administration act in the broader context of an administration that very much wants to take a harder line on Iran. And in particular, several members of the administration firmly believe that the deal was mistaken in separating the nuclear issue from the issue of Iran's regional behavior. believing that to take pressure and sanctions off Iran over a nuclear file was not worth the cost in their view, permitting Iran to continue to misbehave in the region. And all of this context led to President Trump's speech on Iran policy on the 13th of October of this year, in which he said that he could not certify a specific aspect of the Iran deal. The part of INARA that says the suspension of sanctions must be, quote, appropriate and proportionate to the measures taken by Iran to terminate its nuclear program. And in essence, what President Trump was saying was that while Iran may remain in compliance with the deal does not, no longer works for the United States. President Trump went on to say that he would work with Congress and US allies to strengthen the deal, including addressing parts of the deal that are time-limited and addressing Iran's missile program. And he said that if a solution is not reached, the agreement will be terminated. President Trump did not call for Congress to impose new nuclear-related sanctions, which would directly violate the JCPOA and essentially kill the deal. But this course of action risks killing the deal anyway. In the first place, what President Trump calls strengthening the deal is likely to be simply impossible. The inclusion of the missile program was a red line for Iran, and there's no reason to believe that Iran would accept longer limitations under the deal without receiving anything in return. Congressional amendments to INARA, the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, intended to impose sanctions that would be triggered by various activities outside the existing scope of the deal, risk putting the United States in violation, or at least risk giving the Iranians a good argument that the US is in violation, and risk unraveling the deal. And although France indicated some interest in discussing Iran's missile program, France, the UK, Germany, and the EU have stated clearly their belief that the JCPOA is working. Iran is complying with it, and that it should continue to be implemented in all its parts. So the United States will really struggle to persuade its allies to go along with any kind of renegotiation, let alone China and Russia, the other parties to the deal. And Mark Fitzpatrick has written about some smaller tweaks that could be made perhaps to implement the deal better, including in terms of verification. But this is not a matter of renegotiation. That would be separate. And on the Iranian side, Iran might have a legitimate complaint that President Trump's decertification creates a hostile risk environment for foreign businesses, so that even if sanctions are not reapplied, Iran will struggle to get the benefits of the deal. And even moderate Iranian interlocutors say that this is creating a hostile environment towards the deal itself within Iran, could encourage more radical elements of the regime to pursue provocations against the United States, strengthen more hardline candidates to be the next Iranian president, and to risk Iran deciding to pull out of or violate in various ways the deal. So in summary, the current picture is not good. The second question, what were the key conditions and compromises that let the JCPOA be negotiated, and is there any relevance to the South Asian context of confidence building measures? Let me say before I get into that the Iran talks were a non-proliferation dialogue. Any dialogue in the South Asian context would be about confidence building or perhaps arms control in the future, and I'm not proposing that either Pakistan or India would accept a non-proliferation framework or paradigm applied to South Asia. I simply want to identify the key ingredients that led to this deal being concluded and see if any of them were relevant. So I would identify 6 key ingredients. The first is high-level political signals of outreach. So President Obama's Persian New Year video message to the Iranian people in March 2009 included a reference to the Islamic Republic of Iran, making him the first US president since the revolution to refer to Iran in that way. President Rouhani's election in 2013 changed the political dynamic between Iran and the United States and led to a phone call between the two presidents after the UN General Assembly that year. Could such high-level signals be possible in the South Asian context? Perhaps, but they might have to wait for new political leadership in both countries, or at least a new mandate for existing leadership. Second ingredient, the role of a credible and neutral intermediary. In the Iran deal, Oman played an important role as the convener of the first serious back-channel talks between the United States and Iran since the Iran-Contra affair. Here, the parallel to South Asia is not direct, I don't think. And there's a difference, of course, between the convener of back-channel talks and an outside facilitator. But as Rahul Chowdhury was discussing earlier, perhaps there are some discussions that could be had about which facilitators or combination of multiple international facilitators would have credibility on both sides. The third ingredient is, I think, is a very important one, which is the question of how to maintain red lines while beginning serious talks. The United States conducted several rounds of negotiations, including secret negotiations with Iran, before moving any distance on Iran's so-called right to enrich uranium. And when the US did move, it only moved when it had a clear understanding and was able to present a clear understanding of what Iran would have to give in return. And I do think this is relevant, in the sense that talking intrinsically doesn't have to be any admission of concessions on issues of vital national interest or a concession on any red line. Sometimes talking can just be talking. Fourthly, the question of separating issues. The crucial ingredient in allowing the Iran deal to be negotiated was to identify Iran's nuclear program as top priority, to negotiate on that issue essentially alone, and to leave aside for the moment Iran's regional behavior and its missile programs. This was controversial in the context of the Iran deal. It remains controversial, and any such separation of issues would presumably be controversial in a South Asian context, moving away from a comprehensive dialogue towards specific measures. But perhaps it is worth thinking about what kind of transfer of trust and confidence can be achieved by agreeing separate measures that might then be applied to others. Fifthly, the simple fact of long-lasting, very intensive talks meant that a level of trust and shared determination to reach a positive outcome did seem to be built in the bilateral relationship between the United States and Iran. And I join my ISS colleagues in registering concern about the ongoing lack of official dialogue in the South Asian context. And then lastly, this is something of a tautology and circular reasoning, but I think it's important anyway. The Iran deal involved genuine and painful compromise on both sides, and required political leadership on both sides that was willing then to defend those painful compromises at home. And it's still not clear whether they will be able to successfully defend them. But the sign, I think, of a good deal is that everybody hates it in equal measure. So that's the negotiating